Sons and daughters of the living God, happy Sabbath. It is a joy and a privilege to begin the new year with you all. It's the new year. It's that time where we begin to make promises to ourselves. It's the time of year when we make our resolutions, where we say to each other, I am going to achieve this year. It's a time of hope. There are three types of resolutions you can make. Easy resolutions, hard resolutions, and then great resolutions. The easy resolutions, that's the low-hanging fruit. They're the things that you can commit to without any real sacrifice at all. You can get them done. Things like, I'm going to listen to more music this year. Easy to do. Just let your gramophone or your vinyls or your CD or your Spotify play a little bit longer. Congratulations, you have done it. But then there's the hard resolutions. These are the things that require real dedication and sacrifice to achieve. These are the things where you say, listen, I am going to forego these things so that I can receive that reward in the future. These are the hard ones which require self-denial. These are the ones where you make an investment in your time now with sacrifice for a great reward in the future. We do this all the time. If you come and enroll in a course of study here, in any of the medical fields, you will have to sacrifice much time to study, but the reward will be great. We should make these hard resolutions. This year, your resolution might be to be fitter. You will have to sacrifice some early mornings in bed. You'll have to sacrifice a bit of sugar. Perhaps your resolution is to repair a relationship. You might have to sacrifice being right for the sake of being in relationship, but it will be worth it. These hard sacrifices, they are worth making, but they also function in a very interesting way. If you want to achieve something, you will have to sacrifice for it. But if you don't sacrifice for it, you won't achieve what you want, and the thing that will be sacrificed in the end is simply the thing that you actually truly wanted. It works like this. If you want to be a great musician by the end of this year, you will have to sacrifice time to going through the monotony of doing the scales. You'll have to practice the small parts of the song. But if you don't put that sacrifice in, at the end of the year, you will have to simply admit to yourself that you really just didn't want to be a musician. There are things that we should sacrifice for that are hard. There are easy resolutions to make. But then there are the great resolutions. What are these? These are the resolutions you make for other people. Now, I want to say this very carefully, just to clear that up. And I want to thank Andy Stanley for this clarification. This is not me suggesting you should make a resolution for somebody else to do, okay? That never works. This is not me saying you should go to your husband or your wife and saying, I resolved for you to do this year. That will not be good for your relationship. The only people that you can make resolutions for are your pets, okay? That is fair. I have a cat that demands snuggles and attention at 3 a.m. every morning. He has a resolution coming to him this year. Doesn't need to happen. No, when I say make resolutions for other people, I am saying this. Make a resolution for someone else. Make a resolution to sacrifice some part of your life and your time and your energy for them to have a better outcome or a better future. Make a resolution for them to have a better year because of your actions. Why? Well, listen. If you only make resolutions for your own achievements, all you will have done is resolve to make your year all about you. It's not the Christian way. Instead, we as Christians, we're called to follow the example of the Christ. The Christ who said, in paraphrase, have you ever noticed those people who are devoted entirely to themselves, in the end they lose themselves. But those people who are devoted to others in my name's sake, in the end they truly find themselves. Have you noticed that throughout history, those people who are full of love for others, we write their names down. But those who are simply full of themselves, we don't tell their stories. The Christ calls us to a great way of living in this world. Perhaps summed up best when the Christ says, no greater love has someone than this, that they lay down their life for their friend. It was 1949. And up until that date, everyone who had been bit by a coastal taipan snake in Australia had passed away. The coastal taipan, the third most deadly snake in the world, angry, fast, aggressive. It was laying carnage to the north of Australia. See, to create an anti-venom for a snake, you have to catch that species alive and milk it. But no one to that date had been able to catch this snake, and everyone who had been bit had passed away. Until George Rosendale. George Rosendale, a First Nations Aboriginal man, working in the north of Australia on a church facility that he loved, went to the wood pile and picked up a piece of wood. And coastal taipan came out and bit him and attached to his leg. He shook, he kicked it off. His friends saw what had happened. They came to him. The first friend came with a saw. I apologize for this. In those days, the wisdom was you needed to make the cut site bleed. Unfortunately, the coastal taipan has a coagulant in its venom. The friend came with a saw and it wasn't sufficient, so his other friend came with a hammer and a chisel. It ended up stuck in the bone and he went through an artery. They assumed George Rosendale wasn't going to live, but they put him in the back of the Land Rover and drove the 4 hours to Cooktown. When he got there, he went in and out of consciousness, heart attacks, organ failure, but he lived. The only person to live through a bite. He's still alive today, and he's a fascinating and a deeply spiritual person. And he will say this in humility. He will simply say, listen, I can't explain why I am still alive, but I can simply say this. As I was passing in and out of consciousness, I did ask God for my life, and I think that might be the best explanation we have. George Rosendale was bit, and he made it. A few weeks later, a young girl was bit, and she passed away. The news went across Australia. In Sydney, a young man, 20 years old, Kevin Budden, he saw the news of this young girl's passing, and it disturbed him deeply. He thought to himself, we need to do something about this. This snake has been terrorizing us for too long. So he got two of his friends and he said, we're going on an expedition. We're going to go catch this snake. They made their way from Sydney to the north of Australia, camped in the bush. 3 months later, tropical diseases, suffering, hungry, did not catch a single one of these snakes. They began heading back. As they were heading back, Kevin Budden, he said to his friends, I can't go back until we have done this. There's too much at stake. They said, okay, so he went back to Cairns and there stayed in the local museum. He put an ad in the paper, if anybody sees a coastal taipan, please let me know. Somebody said, listen, we've seen one out at the tip, the rubbish dump, the trash, whatever you wish to call it. It was about half an hour out of town. He hitchhiked out there, walked off the main road. As he walked into the rubbish dump, He heard the sound of a rat in distress. He went over and picked up a corrugated piece of iron, and there was a taipan with a rat in its mouth. This was his chance. It wouldn't bite him. He reached down and he grabbed it. He didn't want to put it in a bag by himself, though. That was too dangerous. And so this is the part of the story that I love the best. He walked back out to the main road and hitchhiked back into town. He stuck his thumb out and Jimmy Harris, the truck driver, stopped. What's going on? I've got a deadly snake here. We need to get back into town. Can you give me a lift? I've got it under control. Hops in. The funny thing is, as they began the journey, Jimmy Harris, the truck driver, discovered more about this snake that he was holding and started going faster and faster and faster. They get to the museum. Ernie Stevens, the curator, Jimmy Harris, the truck driver, Kevin Budden with this snake in his hands. What you do is you take the snake, you open the bag, you put the tail of the snake in the bag. As it recoils in, as it begins to pull into the bag, you throw the head, close it up. By this point, Kevin was tired, and the snake was angry. He lost control of the snake as he was trying to put it in the bag. Ernie Stevens and Jimmy Harris ran out of the room, as you should. But Kevin Budden, he'd resolved to solve this problem. The snake struck at his pants twice, didn't go to the skin, he was okay. He could have run at that point. He reached down, the snake struck again, it missed his hand. He could have left at that point. But he knew what he needed to do. He reached down again, hoping to catch this snake. This time the snake caught him on the hand. He picked up the snake, put it in the bag, closed the bag up and sat down. Jimmy Harris, the truck driver, came in and he was livid. He said, "Let me kill this snake." He was so angry. Kevin Budden said, "You cannot kill this snake. We must milk it for its venom." Kevin Budden, the only way in which he could convince Jimmy Harris to take care of this snake, he said, "Listen, we'll put it in a bag, and then we'll put it in another bag, and then we'll put it in a steel box, and then we'll put that steel box in a bag. And if then you can drive this snake to the airport, then you can take me to the hospital." Incredible sacrifice. Jimmy Harris says, okay. Drives the snake to the airport picks the snake up, flies it south. Kevin Budden goes to the hospital. Dies the next day, 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. The snake makes its way south. Melbourne University, their reptile department does not want to they say, "No, we don't want to touch this. This is too much." David Flay out at the Healesville Sanctuary. He's a man of faith, but he also has a couple of kids. He says, "Listen, give me a moment. I need to think and pray about this." He does. He says, "I need to do this. The sacrifice has been made." He agrees. They send the snake out to him. He opens the bag. He opens the box. He opens the next bag, and the snake jumps out. On the journey, it had made its way out of the first bag. Luckily enough, though, he gained control of the snake. And he was able to milk the snake for its venom. See, here's the amazing thing about making an anti-venom. What you do is you take the venom from the snake, and then depending on the species of the snake, you either get a lamb or a horse, and you inject a tiny amount of the venom into it, a sub-lethal dose. The horse or the lamb becomes very sick, but it recovers. And so then you inject some more. Until eventually, the immune system of the animal has created antibodies. So that when somebody is bit, you take the antibodies, you take the blood of the lamb, and you apply it to their infection, to their bite, to the venom, and they are made well. Bruce Stringer, 10-year-old boy, at school, again, these snakes were everywhere, was bit. The venom was flown north. And then in 3 days' time, he recovered because of the actions of Kevin Budden. Bruce Stringer, because of the sacrifice that had been made for him, went on to become a doctor, and I love the way in which history works, the lives that he saved because of that. Kevin Budden passed away as a hero. He gave his life in a way that prevented others dying. And to this day, up in Cairns, he lies under these words, written in Latin. English translation says this: "It is a sweet and a fair thing to die for knowledge." If you want to make a great resolution, make a resolution to serve and to love and to care for, even sacrifice for others. As we begin this year and as we come to this communion table, first of all, never take for granted the amount of sacrifices that have been made for you that benefit you right now. So many people have made incredible sacrifices for you to be where you are. Never take that for granted. Soldiers have fought bravely for principles. Teachers have poured themselves out to help that kid who is struggling in class. They found a new way for them to learn. They poured themselves out for education. There are many people throughout society that create this path of sacrifice that benefits you. As we begin this year, remember that. Be grateful for that. Secondly, as we begin this new year and as we partake of communion, think of ways in which you, in small and big ways, can pass that on for others. Make a great resolution to do something for someone else this year. But then lastly, today we remember the sacrifice of Christ. See, here's the thing. There is a metaphor that stretches across our history. At the beginning of our story, there is an archetype of evil. There is a personification of the devil in the form of a snake. And it comes and it bites our species. Venom flows into who we are, and it creates death and chaos and disorder and destruction. We become infected with selfishness and pride and ego. Our planet no longer walks with God in the cool of the evening in our garden. The venom does its destructive work. But then, in history, Christ comes as the Lamb of God. A life lived with such beauty and kindness and justice and forgiveness and grace. A life lived in such endless sacrifice for others that his perfect act of love in a deep and a true and a mysterious way was the anti-venom for what we got bit with. So that to this day we can say we are saved by the blood of the Lamb. 1 Peter, as we began with, says it best. For you know that it wasn't with perishable things, such as silver or gold, that you were redeemed from this empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors. The emptiness in your life will not be solved by silver or gold. You are not rescued by an economy. You live in this historical trajectory where nothingness is passed down to you and there is redemption from it. And it came from the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect, the one that was chosen before the creation of this world, revealed in these times for your sake. So much so that through him you may believe in God, who raised him from the dead and glorified him, so your faith and hope are in God.